Hello and welcome. All right, so one of my previous posts I talked about taking an audition for the Des Moines Symphony Orchestra, and although I think, in all honesty, it went really well for me, there were some really small, glaring issues that really hadn't been the case for me in the long run. There's just like some small intonation issues that might not really pop out to the general listener, but when you're going up against having people that live music for a living, they might have heard it in a different way. I was also playing on an instrument that I really didn't know, like backwards and forwards. I really wanted to play on my RAF. And there are some pros and cons to everything. I think that specific instrument is something that's a little bit more geared towards orchestral playing rather than my green hoe. But again, it just wasn't an instrument that I was fully comfortable on. So I did end up missing one or two notes on there, which for a sub audition is really, really small. And at the very beginning of my playing, there was just a slight intonation issue. And that might have been enough for them, but they let me go. So that was fine. But on my drive home, although that was a really difficult, it was a very difficult drive. I didn't really enjoy my road home. I actually stumbled across a book that I started listening to on that drive home. It was by Quincy Jones, a really, really famous musician. He's scored like 50 movies. So that's just one of his many accomplishments. But in his book, as I was listening on the way home, he had mentioned that scales and arpeggios were one of the biggest things that he had worked on in his life that made him the player that he became. And then I was listening to a podcast literally later that week, like a day or two later, and somebody else who was just giving their advice about being a better musician said, I was a good player, and what made me great was when I really worked on my scales and arpeggios. And then, actually, I might have the book here actually with me. I was just, as I started looking through one of these books here, just to kind of like look at my scales as I was mulling it around. Of course, that exact same sentiment was there, literally just printed on the back of this book. So within 1 week's time, I had a minimum of three major pushes to say, hey, get back into your scales and arpeggios. So you might ask me, hey, I'm in my 30s, why have you not done this before? The actual answer has to do with this. I have. And so when I was in college, I worked really heavily on this sort of stuff. And then I had a surgery on my face twice. And then directly after that second surgery, I actually got in my car accident. And so after that time, I spent like 5 years. One of the main things I was doing for basically 5 years was working on my scales and arpeggios. Now, back then, I was a single person, and I could spend my entire days doing it however I wanted outside of my job. So, practicing my whole morning before I went in to go teach or something along those lines really wasn't a big deal. Fast forward to 2021, and I have a kid, and I'm married, right? And that changes the dynamics of everything. And having this kid, you can get up early in the morning, or you can stay up late at night, but your daughter might wake up in the middle of the night, and there's just been all these issues of like, when do I actually fit in this time? So when I was getting down to actually play my instrument, I wasn't necessarily working on fundamentals. I was just trying to play stuff that kept my musical soul fed. And sometimes the technical side of playing is not something that feeds your soul. So I really kind of let some of that go so that I could still maintain my passion. Now, my daughter is starting to sleep through the night very well, for the most part. And there's a slight, ever so slight, structure where I know that I can practice typically at some point during the day and also at 6 a.m. So yes, I am getting up very, very well. Maybe it's not early for everybody, but I am getting up at 6 in the morning, and I spend at least an hour typically on just piano, on my digital piano, where I just practice my scales, and nobody else in the house has to wake up and listen to this all day long. And then when my daughter is sleeping, usually during the day, that's when I get at least an hour in on trombone. So it has definitely made a big difference for me. So I thought I would just play through one scale here. I'm not really even going to go too heavily into it, but you'll hear, I'm going to do this on my alto trombone. I might actually have to play this weekend. I'm actually doing a Brahms concert, Brahms 1. Listen to that symphony if you have not heard it. I'd make another post about this, just about that piece within itself, but now's not the time. That piece often is asked on alto trombone. I will most likely try and play it on my big horn, unless they ask otherwise. Again, another story for another day. But I'm gonna just make sure that this instrument I'm in a good place with. I've told you before that it's the same concept. It slides, but its slide is incredibly smaller than my large bore trombone, right? And yet, even though it's smaller, there are still 7 positions to this instrument, and it's in a different key. So when I'm playing a note on here that's in first position, that's what we call open. Okay, that's that note right there. Here's that same note on this horn. They're very, very different from each other. So I have to really kind of be thinking about when I pick up this horn, which is why when I tried to just play Ride of the Valkyries for you randomly on that horn, having never practiced it, that's why I stumbled through it so much, because you have to really kind of think, where are these notes on this horn? So I'm just going to practice through a little scale, and you might hear just a couple of places where I change around the positions and alter it. Now, I spend 5 to 10 minutes on each scale for the most part. It's pretty rare that I get through all the scales that I want to. There's major, minor, harmonic, melodic, and then I have all sorts of arpeggios that I can practice as well. Like I said, I'm going to do a very, very short version here for you. But go ahead and take a listen and see how I ensure that my tone, my tongue, and even my time, there's a metronome. You may or may not be able to hear that with what I have going on, but how I try and pay attention to all of that and play in tune. So as you can see, I still need just a little bit of practice on this horn here. I have not actually picked up this horn, aside from that Ride of the Valkyries, probably in over a year's time. So the mouthpiece is different. Just everything about this horn is different. And as you could hear, there was a couple of places where I basically was either way off or forgot where that actual note lie on the horn. Now, it's obviously not that difficult for me on my big horn where I'm playing the same positions at the same time. But every day, your horn, due to the weather, due to the heat or the cooling, the horn expands and contracts, and it even gets larger or smaller just by you playing it, because the horn itself grows warmer, and so the intonation of the instrument itself is always changing. So it's really important that I'm able to make these changes really, really quickly in order for it to always sound like it's in tune. You just really get a really good grasp of where each horn is at. The intonation on my Wrath compared to my Green Hoe is different from each other. So each position that I'm in, notice that there are no markings here on the slide, if you can see that, to indicate this is where second or third position is. It's all just relative to the day and also the instrument. But what I'm trying to tell you is that each position on each horn is relatively one place or another. Like my F on my Wrath here that I'm playing would be closer to about right here, which is what we describe as just off the bumper. But on my Green Hoe, it would actually be even further out. So, and then that would affect every single other note in what we call that partial. Again, those are some terms I don't necessarily expect every one of you to know, and it's not worth describing to you today. But thanks for watching, and that is what I'm doing to try and get back to that upper echelon of my playing.